Okay, everyone is here. I think we should go ahead and get started. So this is the Science and Cooking Public Lecture Series. My name is Pia Sorensen. Good to see so many familiar faces. Good to see some new faces as well. Who is here for the first time? Oh, good. Okay, and who's been here once before? Awesome, welcome back. Good, good. And I know some of you have been here many, many times. So then we figured out together, right? Those of you who've been here before, we're teaching our traditions. We have traditions in this lecture series. So very soon I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight, Jason Du. But before I do that, and as we usually do in this class, this entire lecture series is modeled after a college class at Harvard College, where each week we basically cover one science concept, and we then invite a chef, locally, internationally, doing different things, and they talk about what they do and how they think about what they do, and then we use that as a way to teach science. And so because of that, we're doing similar things in this lecture series as we do in the class. And the theme for this week, the science theme for this week, is phase transitions. So if it's been a while, how I'd like to think about phase transitions, I think of them in terms of when something changes from a solid to a liquid or to a gas. And in cooking, there are basically phase transitions all over the place. So, boiling water, liquid goes to a gas. Melting butter, solid goes to a liquid. Cooking an egg, liquid goes to a solid. Melting cheese, solid to liquid. Chocolate, right? You really want that perfect transition to happen right as you put this chocolate in your mouth. Gels, you have something that's liquid and you make it solid. Egg white foam, you have something that's liquid and then you whip it and it kind of stops becoming liquid and moving around, and so you can take the bowl and turn it upside down and it's kind of like a solid. And then last week we talked about, actually we didn't, a few weeks from now, we're going to talk about food fermentations, where basically microbes do the same thing. Okay, so those are kinds of phase transitions in foods, but if we go and just first, as we like to do in this class, go and focus on just a very simple material, our favorite material as human beings, water, and we think about phase transitions from that perspective. So then we know, right, you have a solid, you have ice, and at some temperature, 0 degrees Celsius, it turns into a liquid, and then at 100 degrees Celsius, it turns into a gas. And then the question is, well, what determines this? What determines where this happens, where the melting happens, and what determines where the liquid goes to a gas? And that's going to depend on which kind of material you're looking at. But in the case of water, if we want to understand it, let's sort of look at a molecular level. Let's really zoom in onto the water molecules and look at what they look like. So to do that, we're going to do a quiz. You ready? It's a class, so we need to do a quiz. Yeah. Okay, so the quiz is this. I'm going to show you an animation, and you should guess to yourself, is it a solid or a liquid or a gas? Okay, ready? Okay, this could be an apron question, actually. Should we do, okay, I have to tell you, we have aprons. We have beautiful science and cooking aprons. If you've been here before, you know them. They have all of the equations of the week on them, so that when you're cooking, you can be like, I wonder what the equation for an emulsion is. And so basically, we will have little quizzes throughout. We're going to try something new today. Usually we have a different kind of quiz. But today, let's do the quizzing during the lecture. So maybe the first quiz is this. So when you know the answer, raise your hand, don't say it, and then you can win an apron. Okay. What is this? Is this a solid or a liquid or a gas? When you think you know, you can raise your hand. You only have 3 choices, so I mean, really, come on, you should all be raising your hand at this point. How hard can it be? Yeah. Do you want a point, Jason? Just pick someone.
I saw some glasses right there.
You said liquid? Who agrees? Oh, good. You have some support. Okay, great. You get an apron. Okay, so what about this next one? So this is a liquid, and the reason you could tell is, right, that there are these molecules and they're moving over each other. They're not just sitting there, which they would in a solid, and they're not all over the place, which they would be in a gas. Instead, they're kind of moving over each other, but you can also tell how they're sort of stuck down in this, they're sort of sitting down there. Okay, so now that I told this, how about this one? What is this? Gas, solid, liquid? You want to pick someone? It's a gas. Yes, who agrees? Awesome. Oh, apron. Apron. Congratulations. Okay. Okay, so now let's think about these molecules. And if you were to think about, actually, let's think about the ones that are sitting here in the liquid. So there is something that's making them move around, right? And we might call that thermal energy. They have some kind of energy that's making them move around, thermal energy. But then they also have something that's making them stick together. So if we just play it again, mostly they're kind of sticking together so that they stay down here. And then every now and then, there's a little guy that just shoots up, and he manages to break free. And so that energy holding them together is, we might call it interaction energy. It's basically the bonds between the molecules that's holding the water together. Okay, so if I were to summarize what I just said, I would say that in a liquid, in water, all of the sticking energy, the interaction energy, is kind of winning out. It's holding the molecules together. But in the gas, in the steam over your boiling water, the thermal energy is kind of won out. They've all just like broken free from the water, and they're just moving around. So if I were to basically express this, we like equations. So if I were to express this, I would basically say something like this, that the liquid has a lot of interaction energy, the gas has a lot of thermal energy, and it turns out that there is an equation. Okay, so for those of you who are new, we clap for equations. When you see an equation, you clap. That's how it goes. Okay, so there's an equation which goes that the thermal energy is equal to this sort of mess here. So T is the temperature, right? Kb is the Boltzmann constant. It's just a constant. It's just a number. And C is just another constant. For water, it's like 3/2. For other materials, it'll be something else. Okay, so this is how big our thermal energy is in the gas, and it depends on the temperature. And now what I told you, and what I'm really interested in, is what happens right at this intersection where the liquid turns to a gas. What do you know about the U interaction and the U thermal right at that boundary? Anyone want to try? Yes? They're equal to each other, right? Right, because over here, liquid, this one's out. Over here, this one's out. But right at the boundary, they're equal. And this is the equation of this week. Let's clap again. Okay, so for water, this happens at 100 degrees. And so now what you could do is, once you have this model, you can play with it. You can try to understand other things with it. And so what you could do for examples is you could think about, okay, so you have this liquid. What happens if you change the pressure? So let's say now you have this liquid, but instead you have just this really intense pressure sort of pushing down on the molecules. Would it be harder or easier for them to break free? You think it would be easier? What if there's just really this force kind of pushing down on the molecules? Is it easy to break free or harder? Well, the pressure is kind of coming from above, though. It's like coming from above. Any other guesses? Yes?
In the pressure cooker, the temperature gets higher, so you think you need more energy.
Ray, you're already thinking about pressure cookers. Yeah. Who thinks it would be harder to break free? Okay, who thinks it would be easier? Okay, some of you. Okay, so I would think, and maybe this model needs some work, but I would think that if there's this kind of intense pressure kind of pushing down on all of these molecules, kind of pushing them closer to each other so that they interact more strongly, then it would be harder for them to have enough energy, enough motion for them to leave. Does that make sense? And so if you do this in terms of the equation of the weak, you can basically see that if in order to have enough thermal energy to break the interaction energy, you would then need a higher temperature. So this is basically exactly what happens when we cook with a pressure cooker. So in a pressure cooker, the pressure is higher. And because of that, right at the point where water boils, it's actually hotter. It's no longer 100 degrees, it's actually warmer. And because of that, we can get all kinds of amazing things happening. If you're on top of Mount Everest, then you actually have less pressure. So these molecules sort of have an easier time moving about because they're not stuck together as tightly. And because of that, the temperature right at where they boil is a little bit lower than boiling normally, like 92. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. What I want you to do, so your task basically is, I want you, as Jason is talking, try to find examples of phase transitions, and I would think of them very broadly, right? In any time you have something going from a solid or a liquid or a gas, switching between those, keep an eye out for those. There may be aprons. There are more. There's a stash of secret aprons over here somewhere. And so let's basically, let me introduce our speaker. So Jason Du is right here, 10-minute walk. We should all go there after this. Amazing drinks, beautiful, amazing drinks, and also some amazing bows. This is Jason, I don't know, 2 months ago, when we had this amazing teacher workshop in our lab, and Jason came over and basically wowed everyone by making these beautiful little pig bows and chicken bows. And I know today he's going to have you make something else. This today is the first time that we are we're having everyone make something, cook something at their seat. So congratulations. Okay, so let's end this, and let's welcome Jason.
Just gonna turn this up real quick. Hi, I'm Jason. Thank you for joining us. It's kind of funny that for most of your classes, you get these world-renowned chefs from around the world, but I'm just coming from your local tiki bar down the street. Today, we're going to be talking phase transition through basically making dumplings, something that's very important, I think, to the Cantabrigian history here. At our restaurant, we like to call them Peking ravioli, because here in Cambridge, we're the home of Joyce Chen, who famously, by the Cambridge Highlands, which is kind of like Alewife Station, she had a Chinese restaurant there, and because over there was a very large, like Irish and Italian population where she just could not sell Cantonese cuisine to, she renamed them to Peking ravioli and actually started making money, which I think is kind of funny, but also works. So, building off of what Pia was saying with our first thing, we are going to start with a pressure cooker. We've all seen this. We've all made that weird purchase on Black Friday and bought this or got this as a gift. I think everyone has it. And we're going to use that same analogy. We're going to basically just make a stock first. Because when we make dumplings, we all like soup dumplings, we all like that little bit of gelatin, that liquid in it, to fortify it, to make things very consistent in a restaurant. We always want to make sure that everything's very balanced, so we are going to be in the process of adding the gelatinized soup to it, okay? So in a pressure cooker, which I'm going to be honest with you, we're actually not going to fire up. This is all just for looks, because I don't want to pop a circuit down here, because this is more for like computers and things that I think pressure cookers. But inside your pressure cooker, today we are having pork dumplings. What we do is when we butcher the pork, we save the ich bone, which is the shoulder blade. We leave a little bit of meat on, we sear it, and then we actually cook it in a pressure cooker. Funny enough, we just have 3 of these in the restaurant, which is hilarious because they don't take up that much room. And then we're going to cook it with aromatics, carrots, ginger, some bruleed onion, and a little bit of bouquet garni, which is just scallion, lemongrass, and bay. And we're going to be taking our ingredient of the day, which is water, all right? So we're going to be covering it with water, and we're going to be asking a question about the phase transitions with this. Now, as Piers was saying, with the pressure. So here, the way I like to look at it, because we're going to keep going with the bad Amazon purchases. So when you're here at Cambridge, you're covered with a blanket. That is your atmosphere, okay? When you're in a pressure cooker and you're trying to get things to boil, think of it as you bought that weighted blanket on Amazon that we all also regret that's a little too small. Same thing. So when we're increasing the pressure here, we're actually making it harder for the water to actually boil. So here in your home pressure cooker, these guys at medium range, which I highly suggest if you are using this, you don't go on the high setting, you go on the medium setting, is cooking at about 7 psi, which is about 1.5 atmosphere, about, okay? So with that, so it's gonna take it just a little higher for it to boil. All right, so that is one thing that we're here, we're extracting the flavors. The reason why we also like using the pressure cooker as well is because when you're cooking this on a regular stovetop, you have a lot of those aroma molecules evaporating off and things of that nature. So here we find this very important, and it cooks super, super fast because you're also boiling it at a much higher temperature, and you're extracting those flavors significantly quicker. So when you're in a restaurant and I want to cook this in 30 minutes, we do our stocks mostly every day. We make over 2,000 dumplings by hand every day because I don't have a machine yet, which I should probably buy one. So we have to make this pretty much every day. And what we do, well, actually, we're always one day ahead because we let it sit overnight, and through the magic of television, well, or YouTube or whatever we're on right now, we have the gelatin, a very clear stock. Again, if I did this at the higher pressure, it will be a lot cloudier, okay? And also when you are using this at your house, not that this is an infomercial or anything like that, but when you are using this at your house, please let it, when it comes back to pressure, just let it go naturally, don't force it, otherwise you'll get very cloudy stock. So all this is already be mixed into your dumplings, okay? I'm gonna go through all the ingredients, and as I'm talking, I'm giving you hints on what sections are phase changes, and then we're going to ask you about it. The one question I have you about here is the act of gelatinization a phase change? Because what's happening here is essentially the collagen inside of the meat, inside of the bones, is melting and unraveling, and as it cools overnight, it's gelatinizing and holding the water molecules together. So if there is a chemical change in the property of water, is that a phase change? So think about that, okay? So we'll come back to that. That's a pretty tough one, I think, right? Kind of. All right, so now we have another one that's a very interesting phase change. So with dumplings, dumplings were created about 2,000 years ago during the Han Dynasty. At the same time, that's when Chinese medicine really, really came into the fold. Dumplings originally were a way, well, as lore goes, dumpling was originally the way to give people medicine. So the shape of a dumpling is actually the shape of an ear. And the way it was made was essentially filled with lamb, herbs, and spices. And that was a way to help combat frostbite during the winter. So that was a way to get people to eat their medicine. So a lot of times when you see recipes, you're going to see, especially in more traditional Chinese dumplings, you're going to see Chinese chive, which is not really a chive. It's more of like, think of it more like a grass, okay? So it's going to have a very pungent aroma of ginger and garlic, almost. Sorry, more onion and garlic, we'll say. Oh, am I clicking here? Oh, let me take this off, maybe. All right. Okay. So, but with that, we are also going to add Chinese five spice, which is also, again, was created more medicinal properties. It was made to represent the five element, well, in Chinese tradition, the five elements, metal being the fifth element, okay? For us, the only difference that we do is we don't use Sichuan peppercorn in our five spice. We often season that at the end, because one of the very interesting things that you may not know with spices and herbs is that at certain temperatures, the aroma molecules will volatilize. How do you say that? Volatilize? Okay. So we make sure that we try to get the herbs that release their aroma molecules at the same temperature. Because what often happens, you'll see people, they throw a bunch of spice together, they cook it all at the same temperature, and they call it a day. But that's not necessarily the proper way, because some will release their compounds and others will not, or some will release all their compounds into the air and others will not. So what we always make sure is that when we are making our five spice, we often cook our four main ingredients, which are very similar. They come off at like 255 degrees, 254 degrees, that they'll release their aromas into the air, okay? So then here comes another question with phase change. So I have a solid thing here. Okay, it's a spice, all right? So when I put the spice in a pan, We're not going to burn it, although that would probably be the best way to show you. But it is going from a solid state to a gas state. Does the same thing work for spices in that case? That's another question that we're going to ask about phase change later. So think about that. There's another difficult one there that you have to decide. So with that, you notice I kept the phenyl to the side, or the NEC to the side, because we know that these will release their aroma at 255, and this guy will release it at like, it's actually pretty low. It's like 150, 160. So if I combine the two together as a cook, they won't release their aromas at the same time. Cooks, for better or worse, we do things in a lot of repetition, over and over and over again. We really use a lot of intuition. So the way I like to describe it is like, it's like a phrenologist versus a neuroscientist. We're using what we see over a long period of time of us doing, and then we make assumptions why things work. All right, the reason why I love classes like this is because they actually tell you why things work, and sometimes some things are very similar in that sense where like, they look like they were. It's like when you sear meat, it actually doesn't lock in juices. You're still bursting cell walls and releasing juices. But as a cook, it's my skill when I'm cooking a steak after a hard sear that's keeping the juices in. It's not because I gave it a hard sear. So what we try to do here, at least in our kitchen, we try to give our cooks a very good understanding on why they're doing individual things, so they understand why, like, at this stage, you don't throw the phenyl at the beginning. Why don't you throw at the phenyl at the beginning? Because by the time the large sticks of Ceylon cinnamon release all their aromas, the phenyl will be completely busted. There'll be nothing left to it. So that's very important. So we would let this, usually, we'll let it till it kind of has a white smoke, not a dark smoke, because then it's burnt. A wisp of white smoke, then we grind it out, and then that would be the spice that's inside your dumpling that you have. And then with the dumpling, which we're going to go to another fun question with phase change. So the dumpling, we do have a pork dumpling. I apologize for those that don't eat pork. So we have pork shoulder. Again, we use the bones inside the soup over here. We have the pork shoulder. We do add a little bit of heap of the gelatin to it, again, to kind of give it that like soupiness. Again, you can see that even as it's coming to room temperature, it's changing from a gel to a liquid. Again, we'll see if that is a phase change. We'll find that out. Again, to keep with the tradition of dumplings being kind of that medicinal, we are going to add the Chinese chives, which again is not like American chives. That they're more like a grass. Here, these are the stem bottoms that we add in. We're going to add our 5-spice, garlic, a little bit of salt. Most of our seasoning is going to also come from soy sauce, and this is soy sauce and Shaoxing wine, which is just a Chinese wine. It's very similar to a sherry. Think of that like that. And then we're going to add a little bit of brown sugar. And then scallions. Now, this is what you essentially have inside that little bowl in front of you. Now, we gently mix it together. Usually we would be doing this in a colder environment, so the gelatin wouldn't actually melt as fast, but this is fine. And then what we're going to do is we're all going to make our dumplings, and then I'm going to ask you a question while you're making your dumplings, all right? So, if you take a dumpling, all right, which we're going to do, you should all have a little bit of water. You're going to take the water, put it on the rim of your dumpling. Very simple. We're going to do a quick and dirty fold, as I like to call it. All right? Again, the main goal here is keeping that ear shape. All right? And with that, everyone should have, it's about an ounce or 2 ounce filling that you're going to put in the very center of the dumpling. With that, you're just going to fold it over, and we'll do this before you again. And now with these, you're just going to kind of crease it once. Again, keeping that ear shape, and crease it again. And we're only going to do two creases to it, because that's more of a Peking ravioli style. Okay? A jiaozi, which you'll see more traditionally, are going to be more flat and have far more folds, but these are going to be more representative of the ear shape, again, that we're trying to keep with the medicinal. All right? So again, it's just going to be 2 folds to seal it. They might be a little dry, but that's okay. Just add a little more water because they've been sitting out, I think, getting in the air, but that's quite all right. So again, you're going to take your dumpling. You can put your filling. This is going to be a little too much, but that's all right. You're going to take your water. You just go on one rim. You're going to fold it in half. Pinch it. Pinch it. And it should almost form a triangle.
Is there a difference to the sides?
Oh, no. One side might be dust with cornstarch, which will only help it bind even better. And that'll go into another class. I think Pia will have at some point with cornstarch and things like that, right? And so it should kind of meet in the middle. Very, very, very simple fold. And actually, it's most of the time when you see dumplings, they have 8 folds and things of that nature. Those are very beautiful, very pretty, but when you need to make 2,000 every day, you just try to plow through it as fast as you can, just to be honest with you. And these hold actually extremely well, especially for steaming. So you're going to make your 2, and with that, the TAs will eventually go around and collect them. But don't worry about it. I know if some of you are not wearing gloves and things of that nature. We have some we made at the restaurant. We're not going to feed you other people's dumplings. We are going to have the dumplings for you. We do serve them very traditional with little black vinegar, which is think of it as a young balsamic vinegar. So not super sweet, but just a little bit astringent and a little bit funky, and a little bit of chili oil as well. But with that, another question that I'm going to have for you about phase change is, so if I took this dumpling right now, which to you in your hand feels relatively solid. We know that pork or meats in general are upwards of 20-25% water. We also know that vegetables can be up to 90% water. If I freeze this, is that considered a phase change with water because of the water content inside of it? Nothing here is technically moving, as is in your hand, but at the most microscopic level, is there movement in here in water? Think of it kind of like if I took, do I have salt here? I might have salt here. Oh, okay. So if I think of it like the pork right here with all the molecules together as a solid mass, just because they're so small, no matter what, they still move a little bit. So if I take this pork piece, which does have a high content of water in it, and I put it in the freezer, is that also considered a phase change? So that's another question that we're going to ask. Is that another difficult one? Yeah, it's kind of difficult? All right, don't worry. They're smart, I can see. I'm kind of smooth-brained being a chef. You guys got this. You're at Harvard. So with that, then we have the easiest of all the phase changes, as you guys will know. Here we have a beautiful Japanese kaku steamer. And of course here, this is the best example of going from, is that going to set off an alarm? Nope. All right, we're going to close that as fast as we can. And this is the best example of what? Who wants a free apron? What is this the best example of? There we go. Yeah, phase change, exactly. But what is the change, though? It's going from liquid to gas. Exactly. So that is the major one right here. The one thing that is very hard that I could not figure out, and maybe someone in the audience who's much, much smarter than me can help figure out, is in cooking, except for maybe dry ice, except for maybe freeze drying, which is not, both of those which are not often used in traditional, they are used for ice cream and other very, interesting specialty items. In what case, the one case of phase change that I am always stumped on how to use it is going to be sublimation. Sublimation is the transfer of what? Does anyone know? Yes. Give that man an apron. So sublimation is the transfer from solid to gas. So when we look at most things, they're going to go from, they're going to go through the 3 stages. It's kind of like when you're breaking up with someone. There's always stages. It's usually, solid, liquid, gas. You go ice to liquid to gas. Can anyone think of a traditional cooking technique that goes to sublimation? I'm actually kind of curious. I've never could find that. Does anyone have an idea? That's excluding, again, unless someone here has a medical freeze dryer at their house, or I guess now marijuana, or if they have, or it could be, I don't know. I can't even think of one. Does anyone have an idea? I'd be very curious. Mike? Smoking one, solid to, is it an oil, is that a liquid going to a gas?
I think if you think of that, whatever it is you're smoking is primarily water, then you could think of it as, it's sort of like a liquid and maybe it's then going to gas.
Close, so that sounds
Yeah,
close.
Good idea.
What about it's more drink side, but you know, the things where they burn something, they put the cup over to cook, keep the aroma, and that's included part of the drinks and like salties.
So again, I think smoking again. I think smoking's close, right? That seems very, very, very similar. But for us, I think like, you know, the easiest for the cocktail world is going to be dry ice and creating that, because that, you know, that is always sublimation. Does anyone else have an idea? Yes?
Didn't you do that earlier on with spices or like those?
Well, see, I think that one was a trap. This is volatilization. So what's happening in this case, which is a form of phase change. So what we're doing is at this stage, which was the closest thing I could get. So we were on the we got that brain, brain length going right there. This was the closest thing that I could even come up with to get to that level, because you are going from a solid piece of something into a gas, an aroma, but that is not considered a sublimation phase change as well. No. Which is very interesting. I don't think I can think of a non-specialized form for phase change in any way, shape, or form. All right, well, anyone else have an idea? I'd be very curious. Oh, by the way, you cooked this for about 8 minutes. We're just going to leave that there. You're not going to eat that one. That one's probably shot by now, but that's all right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be serving you some of these dumplings. Alex here is going to be plating this up for you. The dumplings, again, are going to have chili oil, but the chili oil we make is not going to be too spicy, so it's going to be perfectly fine for everyone to enjoy. It is going to be pork. We are going to take all your dumplings away from you, though you may love them and you create them with your own hands. Sorry, I do not want to serve them to you, just in case. So we'll be taking those back, but at least we want to test out to see if this would work with you. How did you guys enjoy the interaction of it? Did you make good dumplings? It's cool, right? I wish I could serve it to you, but I don't know how we would do that.
I don't want mine.
The dough, the pocket.
The dough. So that is just, okay. Actually, so we should talk about this. So when it comes to Chinese cuisine with doughs, you have a few types. So when you come to regular gyoza, that is just what we call a hot water dough. So it's flour, hot water, and salt, and that's about it. You can have multiple other types. You can have wheat starch dough and things of that nature. But when it comes to very basic dumplings or Peking raviolis in that sense, these are not true Peking raviolis. Peking raviolis tend to be almost double the thickness because when they were made to mock an Italian ravioli, so they tend to be a lot thicker. These are actually made in the style of a gyoza, which again was, from my understanding, was actually a mistake. Pan-fried dumplings were a complete mistake. A cook in the palace left the dumplings on the stove for too long, so the water had evaporated and they stuck to the bottom. That's where the term pot stickers come from, which is kind of funny, but they enjoyed it and loved them very much. And Peking raviolis are actually always pan-fried. So they are not technically, well, these ones for you are boiled because I don't think I can have 100 pans up here cooking. But most Peking raviolis that you have will generally always come pan-fried because that's how they were traditionally made. They were made to mimic pot stickers. So any questions on the phase changes? Anyone have any idea if the gelatinization is a phase change? Does anyone have a guess? Sir?
Yeah.
Pia, would you consider gelatinization a phase change?
I think in the very general sense that we use it in cooking context, I would say yes, right? Like that picture I showed with all these different eggs changing phases, like I would say yes, yeah.
All right, so the man gets an apron?
Yeah,
Have any
where
left?
do we have the extra apron?
All right, then I guess the next question would be, when we're now that we're thinking about it, and Pia's giving the background on what is a phase change when it comes to culinary, would the act of freezing a dumpling that does have a water content be considered a phase change or not? You think so? All right, Pia? You think so? Oh, okay, good. All right, good. Excellent. I have no idea.
You have to
This is
point
great.
out who
The
gets
gentleman
it.
right up there?
Okay, there, and
This gentleman right here. Oh, yeah. All right, so what we find very amazing is in the act of cooking, there's a lot of science that happens that we don't quite understand, which is really awesome. But at the same time, when we do have a better understanding with it as a cook or a chef, it allows you to perform your task much better, which we do appreciate classes like this. With phase change, it's very interesting that, you know, when we see examples online and we see examples, you know, in general, it's always, as Pia said, it's always often used with water. But we don't realize that how much that we use phase change in multiple stages when creating a dish in a kitchen. And it's very, very fun to see it and very interesting to see it. Does anyone else have any questions about it? Wow, this was probably the fastest lecture for the science of cooking we probably did. I'm not going to blather on 3 years about my restaurant in the middle of nowhere. But, so, oh, it's very good? You like the dumplings? Good. Not too spicy? No? Good. Excellent.
So if I was to do this at home, should I buy the circular?
Oh, yeah. So whenever you're doing it, like, you can make it, okay? They do become more finicky because they're more elastic, all right? Here, here we'll go into glutens eventually, but these have plenty of time to rest, and they're perfectly fine. And these will actually have significantly less water content than what you're going to have, not only through the process, because when you are creating a dish, especially for packaging, you want your water content to be low to prevent it from, you know, oxidizing or rotting. So any dumpling you buy in the store, and these ones are going to be store-bought dumplings that I did for you all. Sorry about that. Well, not the dumplings themselves, but the wrappers are store-bought. When you do that, they are going to be significantly drier, and also as they sit in a fridge, the fridge will also sublimate in some respect. Well, not, but they will, you know, slowly dehydrate. All refrigerators are dehydrators. They're just larger versions of it. So when you keep something there, they will eventually dehydrate. So they will always be a lot harder to fold, actually. So when you have fresh dumpling dough, they fold like a breeze. They take no time whatsoever. These ones will crack. They're finicky. You have to keep them moist. So yes, you can use them. Just when you do it, just make sure you have them under a wet towel, and then do them all at once, and then freeze them, which now we know is a phase change.
And making at home, is it like making pasta? Like
So what we generally do, even if you are making that home, we generally pre-steam all of ours. Right? We don't cook them to order. It's a lot easier to manage and hold, and that way they also don't dry out that much as well. But when you're doing it at your house, if you are not using a thermometer, you're just going to boil them. If you're boiling them and not steaming them, you're just like a ravioli with a meat filling. Once it floats, it's generally done. Yeah, generally done. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, sorry. There's a spotlight in the way. Yes, sir.
So I think about this is earlier when we're talking about releasing the aromas from the spices. And so in order to maximize the aroma of all the spices, put them in at different times, or
Correct. So usually with spices, especially the harder, I'm going to say bark-like spices, cinnamon, star anise, cardamom, any of those that has a harder shell, they tend to almost, be around 255 to almost like cinnamon's 264 in that range. So generally cinnamon should, unless you grind it up, then there's more surface area, so it's going to heat a lot faster. So generally with cinnamon is always in first, followed by your barkier substance, followed by your smaller berries. So if you're using Sichuan peppercorn, white peppercorn, or things of that nature, will be at the very end. Fennel as well kind of falls into that category. They're much lower temperature. They're going to be in that 160, 150 range. So when you are toasting your spices, you have to be very cognizant, even especially when you're making large batches, that you want to do them in the order that you're supposed to be cooking them. Otherwise, you're basically just adding something, you're not really toasting it at all because you added it to, all at the same time. Or you're cooking it to the point where all of the aroma molecules just evaporate out of it, essentially. So that is that. I guess, is there any other questions?
your temperatures, Fahrenheit, Celsius?
Fahrenheit, yeah. Might be late for the microphone now. But yes,
Are the temperatures in Fahrenheit or Celsius?
we do all our temperatures in Fahrenheit.
Thank you.
I know Pia is a lot more scientific, so you'll see everything in Celsius. But you'll be happy we do all our measurements in grams. But we do all our temperatures in Fahrenheit. It's just a little easier for us, even though it's kind of odd that, water boils at 212 instead of 100, but it is what it is. Anything else? Yes?
So when applying this heat to like the spices, does it matter how that heat is applied? Or could it be like just different companies or like hot pan?
That's actually very interesting. So usually, boiling in stock generally will work for some, like this goes back to the phrenologist versus neurologist, all right? So when you see a lot of classical French stocks, and they have their bouquet garni, which is the aromatics, you'll notice most of those bouquet garni are gonna be fennel, peppercorn, bay leaf, thyme, rosemary. All those aromatics are a much lower temperature release. Those are 150. So if you're boiling at 212 or whatever you're cooking at, they will release into it. But if I add cinnamon, which is very traditional for a Chinese stock, a superior broth that needs 5-spice, you always toast that ahead because we know intuitively that it doesn't taste like cinnamon if I just add it to water and boil it. We don't know why, but the reason is because it does not activate till 264. So that's why. So again, it's that whole through that repetition and intuition, we understand this. We don't know why we understand it, but there is always something behind it to describe it. Yes?
So how do you know what those temperatures are?
ChatGPT. No, but you can generally if you can buy I don't know, actually I don't think it's in the flavor Bible, but you can get it's mostly for perfumes and things like that. They'll give you when those aroma molecules are released at what different temperatures. You could buy a chart. So lavender is much lower than rosemary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure I actually probably wouldn't be as accurate, but yes, you can buy a list of that type of thing. But in general, harder spices are above boiling, and then berries, which are, remember peppercorns and things are essentially like berries, are much lower temperature. So those, as long as you're within the range, you should generally get it pretty well. And the way I look at it is the barkier the substance is, the more heat you're gonna have to apply to it, if that makes any sense. Cool. Anything else? A lot of spice questions. Yes.
I want to know how you got into cooking.
Got into cooking is just like any, I guess, immigrant family. We had a Chinese restaurant growing up, and that was fun, and I enjoyed it. After school every day, you go to the restaurant. You eat a lot of food. Gained a lot of weight. I was like 315 pounds. With that, it's one of those things where, in this situation, like me talking to you like this is very easy. In a one-on-one, I'm not very good talking with people. It's like an introversion type of thing. So the way I love cooking is that I can throw you and show you through food and service and atmosphere, like a level of care that maybe that I can't verbalize to you one-on-one in person. So that's how my entire life I've shown that by creating, a spread and having fun, and maybe I can hide in the kitchen while you enjoy it, but my expression to enjoying you being here in my house is gonna be that pot of food on the table for you. So the way we look at the restaurant here, or the bar, we're more of a bar than a restaurant, is we're not so much a restaurant, we're more of like an entertainment, a night out. So we try to make sure the entire, I guess nowadays everyone calls it the vibe, but the entire vibe is something that you want to enjoy your evening. It's your second living room. You can come in, breathe a sigh of relief, and relax. I'm never going to be able to do some of those those crazy tacos that were up there when we first started. I'm talking about, chocolate that has 20 different textures and things like that. That's just not what I'm good at. What I like to think that we're good at is bringing you, good, simple food in a nice atmosphere and in a timely manner at a good price. And that's the way of us showing a level of care. Sometimes it doesn't vibe with people. They want some authentic Chinese food made by albino monks on a mountain somewhere. But, you want a solid crab rangoon, we got you, So I guess that'd be it. It's pretty simple. All right, any other, yes?
Circling back to the temperature in the pressure cooker, 112 degrees versus 100, that seems like such a small difference when you see the
we like to describe the magicalness of the pressure cooker in my again, the phrenology versus the neuroscientist type of way, is when you're in a pressure cooker, and Pia will correct me if I'm 100% wrong, by creating that level of pressure and it is boiling and the heat is staying in there, basically as Pia was saying, and we said with the weighted blanket, there's a lot more force pushing down on the water. The easiest way I can describe it. So when you're putting enough, just sheer thermal energy in there to make it boil and come up to pressure, you're boiling at, I mean, it has to be significantly higher, like 265 or something like that, right? And it's going to be.
Yeah, I would think in Celsius it's like over 110, 115.
So with that, I mean, for me, in my, again, limited understanding, essentially you're boiling something at such an incredibly high temperature where just the way the thermal conductivity is just breaking apart the meat super fast because you're just applying that much more energy into the meat because that's all you're doing. In order for it to hit that pressure, there's just so much thermal conductivity going through the pieces and breaking down the fibers in there that you cook so much faster versus boiling it on a stovetop and there's no evaporation because what's happening when she had that thing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, and that little molecule pops up, it pops up and has nowhere to go, so it adds to the force essentially on top, right? Is that how it works?
I really loved everything so far.
Okay, all right. So as you boil, so as I bring this to a boil at 212, and all the energy needs to escape, but now it suddenly has nowhere to escape because it's in pressure. So right now, again, we're under a blanket, a basic blanket of atmospheric pressure, and as those molecules burst up, then they go into the air. But here, there's nowhere to go. So they add to the atmospheric pressure, making more energy having to go to push the next one, adding more, going constantly. So then there's just so much thermal energy going through the meat, and your collagen and stuff breaks down, 180, 200, So normally when you're boiling at 212, by the time it takes that thermal conductivity to kind of think of it like molecule, like, on your desk when you pull that metal thing that bounces back and forth. So you're trying to get that heat mass through all the different molecules to the other side to heat. But instead of using just a blanket term of 212, because that's where water boils, that's all it's going to boil at. But suddenly you have this pressure blanket on top that allows it to go higher. Those balls move a lot faster, so it's passing that energy through those balls significantly faster. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Cool. That just wing that. Go.
What does it do to the taste? Is it similar to like traditional low and slow on stove?
So a few things with a pressure cooker that you do have to be careful of. One, you will achieve the same, you can receive the same texture, the same taste in a short amount of time. But if you cook it for too long, you're messing it up even more. Okay? So when you're looking at that, that's why when you're cooking in pressure cooker, it's like 20 minutes, 30 minutes maximum. You're not doing that much. Well, I guess you could do some if you're doing it very low. At the restaurant, we do always ours on very low pressure. These, your home cookers can still get to 11 psi, which would be, I don't even know, like, no idea how many atmospheres that is. 1.5 for 7. So
Closer to 2.
So almost 2 atmospheres. So double the weight of the atmosphere on top of you right now, right, essentially, which would be very, very heavy. We don't usually cook that hard. You just have a higher chance of basically just breaking down all the fibers, and then you'll get like I call it like a wet towel texture. Have you ever had like a Bounty towel and you got it really super wet and you try to pull it where it's juicy, but it's really dry and really weird. So that's what the texture you get with those same fibers. Because you're just breaking them to hell at that point. Can I say that? That doesn't matter. Okay, so yeah, I hope that answered your question a little bit. But yes, and to continue with your question, because there's nothing can escape here until you release the pressure, all of those volatile aromas, the VOCs, are going up and they have nowhere to go. So then they resettle in the stock. So that's why we always cook our stocks in a pressure cooker. So you're not losing them into the air. So they're going to go up and then they're going to resettle and reinfuse. All right? That's why we also say never use the forced depressurization because they're just going to shoot out the side and there was no point on you cooking in a pressure cooker other than speed. It no longer adds to the flavor. You just did it it's a microwave at that point. which is not bad. I mean, it's a wet microwave. But you lose the addition, what I would say is probably one of the most important qualities of the pressure cooker is retaining, again, this is not like an ad for this, I should just block out the name. It's one of the most important qualities of a pressure cooker, in my opinion.
Well, what about Maillard reactions?
Oh, okay. So Maillard reactions. Okay, for us, for Maillard reactions with this, we do sear all our meats ahead of time. Again, it's Maillard reaction. It's not caramelization. It's not like sugars cooking, correct? So it's denature. You're quizzing me. This has been 10 years.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
10 years, Pia. I just remember it's denaturing of proteins, right, or something like that.
Well, one of the things I love about pressure cookers is that boiling water, it's just going to be at 100 degrees Celsius. No matter what you do, once it goes above 100, then it's steam. It's something else, right? Boiling water is going to be stuck at 100. In a pressure cooker, you can get it hotter, and so you can get reactions happening that wouldn't happen at 100 degrees, right? If you boil a piece of meat, okay, fine, but it's not going to have that browned, nice surface. But if you cook a piece of meat or maybe a vegetable, you're going to start getting some browning reactions because they only happen at a higher temperature. Some of you may know that. So that's another reason that I love pressure cookers. Sorry, I'm sure you were going to say something else.
I thought you were quizzing me on what the Maillard reaction is. All right. But again, this is also the good thing that we actually have someone that knows all this. Yes, you have a question?
Thank you. I'm not sure the best way to ask this. I'm kind of wondering about the difference between like dry toasting spices and toasting them in oil, like whether you want them to like turn into a gas or a liquid, or to like a more like less viscous liquid, because once they're a gas, they're gone. So yeah, is that why people toast things in oil, because it doesn't boil off at 250, or is it like, what are the different ways that you try to best get the flavor from spices?
So I guess the best way I will explain it, and I am unsure of the science behind it, again, this is the whole intuition and doing, very similar, again, not V-E-R-Y, but V-E-R-I, very similar, where you're looking at something and you think it's going the way it is because you create a myth in your head. So my understanding, I'm actually not going to use spice, I'm going to use carrots as the example, okay? This could be very weird, okay? So carrots, if you cook them in the water, taste like nothing. You cook carrots in a fat, they taste more like carrot. So to me, and then Pia can correct me, is certain items, and I'm guessing it's something to do with bonds, when their VOCs come out, they get attached to something more readily than other things. Is that correct?
Could be.
Could be. So like as a chef, as you're cooking, like if you blanch garlic to remove the astringent flavor, but if you want garlic oil, you slow infuse it in oil. Does that make sense? So as you become a chef, as you become a chef, I guess eventually you're anointed one day. But when you're cooking, you will, through intuition and repetition, you will find that oil will take on flavors of some items versus water. Just like broccoli cooked in oil doesn't taste more broccoli, but if you cook broccoli in water, you can have a very good broccoli soup. So you'll find certain items attached to fats better than they do to water or liquids. Spices in general attach better to fats than liquids. Does that make sense? At all, in any way, shape, or form?
I guess, what's the benefit of like dry toasting over oil?
Oil toasting. Oh, okay, that was my bad. Okay, so it's just like we said with this. If we're cooking in oil, the oil is going to take on the aroma. All right. If I don't want a fatty stock because it's cloudy, I don't want oil in my stock, so I'm going to want to toast it. So you are going to lose some to the atmosphere around you, but it's going to bring most of them to the surface because you're not burning the crap out of it. And then you're going to add that bomb of flavor with all your what is it? It's called like cinnamon or whatever, some weird name, whatever the aroma molecule is, to my stock. So that's going to be, you're going to heat it, it's going to come to the surface, and then you're going to add it to your stock. Versus if I do it in an oil, it's going to go all into the oil, which I have a beautiful cinnamon oil. But I hope, though I bet you cinnamon's probably better with water. I would assume so. It would be better with water because because it's cinnamon syrups taste much better than cinnamon oil. Though I don't think I've ever had, no, cinnamon oil probably is pretty nasty stuff, I bet. But anyways, so, and some other things will also be better with alcohol as well. That's why you'll get some liquors where they have to use artificial flavorings because you can't have the aroma molecules of the item attached to liquor, so they'll just add fake flavorings to bring it up to something that tastes like it, if that makes any sense. So, yes?
So the pressure cooker allows you to cook faster because it's hotter. I'm curious about going the other way. If you are at less than 212 degrees, presumably it just means it will cook slower, but it will still cook. And then I think you also mentioned that collagen has to be a certain temperature. So is there a minimum temperature to cook?
Yes. So depending what you want to achieve. If you don't really care about the collagen, then yes, I can put this in a vac bag. I could put the stock in a vac bag and I could cook it at 180 degrees. Vegetable fibers will break down at 180 degrees, right? So you can achieve some of the same things. Exactly. It's just more of time and temperature. Time, as we will all find out eventually, will eventually solve all things. So with that, you can, if you have the time, at our restaurant as well, we have, it's funny, we have a wall of these guys, and we also have a wall of immersion circulators. So we do use both cooking as well, depending, it's more of a textural change. Here you are really breaking down the fibers a lot in a short period of time. If you're doing, slow cooking, generally, if you don't want to break down the fibers of the vegetable, you'll cook it at 179. And they magically won't break down because you never hit 180. So it just depends what you want to achieve on that flavoring. And then I bet you in another class you'll talk about the reverse with, vacuum sealing, which is completely opposite. It's removing of atmosphere, correct? Or, yeah, okay. So that's why if you put something in a vac bag, like liquid, it'll boil because you're removing the atmosphere. So now there's no blanket covering it at all. So now the molecules are like, whoopee, and they just jump out everywhere. So that's complete opposite, but was that also a phase change, I guess? Yeah, it would be, yeah. Okay, cool, yeah. So yes, great class. Anything else? Yes?
The ratio that you use for like the ratio, was that for this filling that we ate?
Oh, yeah, so these are a lot. They're not going to be like, if you were making a soup dumpling, yeah, so soup dumplings are not, I should turn this off. Those dumplings are done, by the way. We're not going to open that. So when you're doing a soup dumpling, you're going to want a much stronger gelatin. So this would be more of a natural gelatin. You can see that's not at room temperature, that's melting right now because there's not a lot of bones in that stock because we're only using like a little bit of bones for a lot amount of water. But when it comes to, if you're making a soup dumpling, you're going to want a very, very solid at room temperature. So if you're at that point, you're either adding, if it's pork, you're gonna add natural collagen in the form of like pig's hooves, or you're gonna add gelatin sheets to that to get it to that texture that you want. Those should almost like bounce like an eraser, okay? Because you want to keep it solid through the entire steaming process almost.
How do you figure out what's a good timing to cook or like?
Oh, to cook the soup dumpling. So when you're cooking, well, xiao baos are a little different because those probably take about up to 15 minutes to steam. So they're much significantly longer time because essentially when you're making it, you can do two processes. You can do one where you're taking little cubes of gelatin mixed in, which will cook faster, but will give you a weird, in my opinion, just a little mealy texture. Or you take a larger cube of gelatin and fold the pork around it. But that's going to, again, it's going to require a lot more energy to get to the center to heat it. So just as a tangent, if you are doing the alternate one, because you're using a lot of energy in the form of and time to get it there, your dough will be much different than this dough. You're going to need a much stronger dough. So not only are you going to use a much stronger like flour in that base, you're probably going to want to use like we do half yeasted dough, half hot water dough. You mix the two to make the dumpling dough. So it's a much firmer dough. So when you're steaming it, the dough doesn't just disintegrate under the time of cooking. So that'll be a little different. Did that make any sense? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yes.
Hi, Jason. I'm curious to know your dumpling recipe, if it came from like a family recipe that you had growing up, And if so, did you adapt it or edit it in any way at all to be served at your tiki bar? Because I've heard food at restaurants are usually saltier to enhance the flavors or to better pair with drinks. And so I want to know if you've changed it at all, or would it be different if you were to make dumplings at home for loved ones?
So I guess I would say growing up, like, you know, I've said most people don't really have a recipe that's just kind of eyed, if that makes sense. You know, you see them make it, and then you duplicate the taste as much as possible, and then you develop a recipe for consistency as much as possible. So, I mean, not to be like removing the romanticism that is my career of being a chef. 99% of that is like, oh, my nana used to make this thing, and then I made this. No, that most of that is not that true. They may have seen it, but when I'm cooking a dumpling in, like, we don't use this. I love this little thing right here. This is gorgeous little thing, but I would kill myself if I had to cook with this every night. We use steamers that you can roll whole humans into, essentially, when we cook our dumplings. The cute little recipe that my grandma made for dumplings when I was growing as a little, like, portly fat kid would not survive that type of style of cooking and pressure. So you do have to make alterations. It's more of, to add the romanticism back in, is capturing those stories and then rewriting them so you can bring it to the people. That's how it is. So it's more those dishes are representative of I guess, my story as growing up, but they're not necessarily exactly the pages out of my book, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. Anything else? I think I've babbled a lot, so. All right, cool. I think we're all talked out. Nice.
Okay, good. So I would say we'll stay up here for a bit if you have more questions. There are some books in the back. We will be back next week, same time, same place, with Joanne Chang. And let's thank Jason one more time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.